First of all, I just wanted to thank Optus for having us here today. For those of you who don't know, Cisco is completely and 100% dependent on partners to get to market, so it's always a privilege to be able to talk to you in an Optus environment. The second thing I'd like to do is to thank all of you for choosing to attend this session. In July of 2011, the United Nations Human Rights Commission legislated that internet is now a basic human right. A year later, in July 2012, a Nobel Peace Prize winner provided the most amazing presentation. And the presentation was about the greatest revolution going on as we live right now. And you've heard some excellent speakers today. And he talked about the greatest revolution. Now, I'm going to talk about that person towards the end of my presentation. But the theme that I want to share with you is really some of the things that we see going on. And obviously there's been some fascinating speakers today. I'm going to sort of thread through it more from a, I guess, technology angle. Don't worry, don't run out of here. It's not going to get too deep. In fact, in some ways I'm going to go up a level and down a level. But certainly in terms of some of the big bets, as Ian was saying, that Cisco's been making in the last 12 months and going forward. And then I'm going to talk about some of those technology transitions, and then I'm going to talk about something called the Internet of Everything. What do we mean by that? And try and bring it all together. So we've, in engineering terms, talk about latency of zero. We try, when you send a packet piece of information from your computer, your smartphone, to something else, you want it to be instantaneous, whether it's to the computer next to you or whether it's a computer somewhere in the cloud. Our challenge as a networking organization has always been to bring network latency to zero, and that has its complications. But today what I want to share with you is what I call a business latency of zero, real time. Let me give you a little story. When I was in the States in December 2010, I was at Best Buy. Everybody know Best Buy. They do about 45% of all electronic goods in the United States. And when there was you look at the store and there's people around you and there's cameras, and I couldn't help but noticing how many people had their little cameras, smartphones, taking pictures of the camera, going back, coming back from Amazon, etc., and giving them a price. And they would go up to the attendant and say, listen, I can get your phone, that particular camera, which you're pricing at $350, I can get it for $280. I can get it there, I can get it here, I can get it online. Now, what happened to Best Buy at that time was they started going down. In fact, their share price really plummeted. They went through 5 CEOs, and they realized that they had to do something drastic. So what they've come up with in their most recent CEO, and in fact appointed a CDO, a Chief Digitization Officer, was same sort of thing happens. You take a picture, it goes up, comes back, but it gets intercepted by a thing that they call omnichannel. And basically what it does is it says, okay, and in real time, it tells the user that not only can you get this price at $280, right, at Best Buy, but there's some other little things that you can get. For example, it's available right now. For example, there's technical help, etc. Business in real time. I'll give you another example, the stock exchange. ASX, Chi-X. Chi-X is the competitor to the Australian Stock Exchange. And when they came into this country, they came and talked to us. And I said, what's your business plan? What are you trying to do from a business perspective? And they said to me, 90 microseconds. I said, no, what are you trying to do with your business? They said 90 microseconds. We have to compete with the ASX and other stock exchanges around the world, we have to do a transaction in under 90 microseconds, and that's got to be shared across all brokers. Now, 90 microseconds for a full transaction is really seriously hard, okay? And that was the challenge. That was their business challenge to compete in this market. Now they're doing this around the world. We met the challenge, we got the business. The point I'm trying to make is it's no longer just a technical latency of zero, it's a business latency of zero. Now, many people have talked about Amazon. We know they started life selling books and then selling everything, right? They then got into Amazon Web Services, which is doing close to $4 billion in web services, that is computer services in the cloud. So they've done tremendously well. We know that. And what I want to do today is share what I call the second order effect of many of the things that you've heard so far. Now, you know, too, that essentially Amazon has put plenty of businesses out of business, like Borders. But here's the interesting thing, that the people that were working for Borders are not really fit or have the right skills to work in Amazon. Something to think about as you move forward, not only in terms of your own personal careers, your kids, your life, and so on. So something big, something profoundly big is happening right now. I put this slide up in 2009, and I said, all markets are getting disrupted, and you've heard plenty of examples of this. Whether it's books, whether it's music, you've heard it throughout the day. You've been hearing it for many years. Here's an example of universities. This is UNE, who have announced in July open online courses. Instead of a course costing $2,000 to go to university, it's now $500. They call it the Jetstar University. In other words, the no-frills university. You pay $500. If you need tutors, you can get it, etc. Now, this concept started as MOOC, massively open online courses, a few years ago. There's a guy in Stanford, Professor Thurm, who started Udacity. And his first course that he put on, we talk to unis and they're trying to expand their class size from 100 to 200 or 300 or 400. His first course had 160,000 students online. In fact, he's gone as far as to say that by 2050, there will only be 10 universities in the world. Now, obviously, a lot of academics shun that, but the move to MOOC is inexorable. It's happening. Uni of Melbourne just announced that their first course, which was on macroeconomics, they had 50,000 students. This is now, right now, 50,000. That's more than all the students in the whole university. One course. This is we're never going back. Massive changes to universities. I'm talking structural, I'm talking business, I'm talking how we teach, everything, and it's all happening. And it's happening because of two things. One, we're digitizing everything and anything, and two, we're transporting it. The business of Optus and Cisco is the digital distribution of bits. In the 21st century, that's what it's all about. We've moved from the last century where it was all, atomic. Now it's about digitizing, and we're digitizing everything and anything. And in fact, it's very interesting that when you do that, you go down to marginal cost. When you go down to marginal cost, economists tell you round it down to zero. And that's happening. We've seen it in all of those industries. Down to marginal cost, down to zero. The opposite's also happening, by the way. That which is atomic is going up in price. And if you think about what are the sorts of things that will never be able to be digitized, I thought of one which was aged care until I heard that in Japan they now have robots looking after old people. So even that one is under threat. Some massive disruption going on. Oops. Retail, as we know it, and in particular in Australia, we lagged Europe, US by 12, 18 months. And we woke up about 12 months ago to realize that this thing's happening. Now, we say that, they got smashed. But, last November, Black Friday, when they put everything online and there were all these sales, in one day, in the United States, they did $1.1 billion. And the interesting thing is that in 2010, 6% was done on mobiles. 2 years later, 24%. And it's rising on mobiles, in retail. If you think that's good, look at what happened in China. This was Singles Day, 11/11. $3.1 billion in online in one day in China. Taobao, in 1 year, in 2010, did more trade online than the top 5 brands in the whole of China. Something like 45,000 products a minute through Taobao. There is something fantastic and terrific happening in retail, but not if you're just in bricks and mortar, and that's the key. It's now possible to build, to construct entire companies out of code. I didn't even put Google up here because Google's got infrastructure. These guys don't have any infrastructure. They've just written lots and lots of lines of code. It's pure software. Talk about a transformation. Think about the Industrial Revolution with these smoke chimneys and factories and people and so on. This is lines of code. Massive change. The car. In this Chevy Volt, there's 100 million lines of code. There's over 100 controllers in there. And to fix the car, you actually need to be a software engineer. Software upgrades determine that experience. 25% of the cost of a new BMW is in building the software. And that's a car as we move forward. And economists put this out, an article on General Electric Motors. If you look at cars and where they're going, they're becoming, and in fact there was a great quote from Ford this morning, Bill Ford. And here's the thing, I know we've got a lot of IT people in this room, but I'm now talking about CEOs. They get it. Business gets it, and that's a bit distorted. They get what's going on here. You can see Gail Kelly. This is a survey from IBM. IBM does the survey of CEOs every 2 years. And you can see what's happened to how important technology is to CEOs' business, what they consider to be the most important factor to their business over the next 3 years. They absolutely see a transition from IT under the old CIO, right, to some of the things we heard from Bill about in terms of Chief Innovation Officer. Not Chief Talking Officer, but Chief Transformation Officer. Because what's going on is that IT is now becoming part of OT. You've only got to look at the utility industry. When 10, 15 years ago, we were selling our products to the IT department, and then in the last 10, 15 years, what happened was the electricity engineers realized that to distribute grid electricity more efficiently, you needed smart meters, you needed these things on poles, which we call routers, which we connected into switches, which we looked at in a data center, and guess what? That's all IT. And what we're seeing is they are spending 1, 2, or 3 orders of magnitude more in the electricity side of the business, in the operation side of the business, than they are now in IT. Big changes. We heard from Mike Hart today, but when Ian Narev, the CEO, in his first speech 12 months ago to the market, in his first speech, he talked about Combank. The first thing he said was, we have a competitive advantage, because actually he said 4 billion and Mike said 2, so I don't quite know exactly what, maybe it's over a period of time. But he said $4 billion. We've spent $4 billion on technology. And we spent it in a way that does the following. So that small business, and Mike made a point of this, but I really want to highlight it because it's really important. He said, small business can immediately see your payment instantaneously, business latency of 0. What does that mean to you as a small business owner? Credit, 3 days of credit over and above any other bank. Is that valuable? Yes. Did he talk about technology? No. But it's because of technology that Ian Narev is saying, I have 12, 18 months competitive advantage. That's going to take, a huge amount of effort for the other banks to catch up. That was his first speech. So he gets it too. He gets it. Capgemini did a survey around the world of about 500 companies to say, okay, let's put some metrics around this. And they looked at 2 axes. One, digital intensity. How much digitization is there in this business? And 2, how forward-leaning is management to take the business and transform the business into some of the things that we've been hearing about today? And they mapped them. And they collected them. And this is what they found. Those on the top right-hand corner, those are highly digitized with a forward-leaning management in terms of transformation, generated 9% more revenue, were 26% more profitable, and had a market valuation compared to the others of 12%. Actually, what they found was when they drilled within a segment, the same thing happened, a bit like a fractal. The pattern just repeated itself. So as I say, something big is going on. Something profound is happening as we speak. I want to now drop down a bit and talk about what are the transitions that we in Cisco see that is making or enabling some of these things happen. And you can see them up there, and I'm not going to drill into them in too much detail, but I'm going to sort of weave between some of the things that have been said today. Mobile, cloud, analytics, new apps, and the Internet of everything. And why are we here? We're, all guests of Optus. Because it's the intelligent network, the stuff that we do, the stuff that Optus does, that actually brings all of this together. Turn connectivity off, and we can't move forward. So that's really fundamental to this. So let's talk about mobile. Now, I'm not going to go through all the stats. 1.6 billion smartphones, 54% in Australia. University of New South Wales just announced they're deploying, because it's not just about licensed spectrum, it's also unlicensed spectrum. University of New South Wales is our first customer to deploy 802.11ac, which gives every student 1 gigabit per second plus Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi on the campus. They have over 20,000 students. And an amazing number, they tell us that each student has 5.6 devices. So, amazing stuff. Anyway, the point is this. We know a lot of the metrics. We know this trend is, like a hockey stick. Here's the thing. When that woman gets off that train, it is fundamentally important that the coffee shop at the top of that escalator gets that woman when she gets off the train and before she gets to the top of the escalator. Because by the time she's hit the top of the escalator, there are 3 or 4 other coffee shops. And you've got to get that person well before they hit your particular geography, your particular office. And here's a great stat. The closer users are to a business, the more likely they are to click onto, and you can see the absolute explosion of advertising going on, and loyalty programs, and location-based applications. And Mark Benioff at the World Economic Forum, in my view, absolutely nailed it, and it also comes out in the Optus Future of Business report. It's not whether everybody's using mobile phones. We know that, and the numbers are really out there. The real question is whether your company is connected to them. That's the issue. How are you connected to everybody who's now got this smartphone in their back pocket? That's the issue. It's that second order effect. We know the numbers. What are you going to do about it? 3 things have changed the rules of tech forever. First of all, the global economy tanked in about 2008. We called it the GFC, the global financial crisis. That was one. The second thing that happened was the iPhone, which was absolutely transformational. I think everybody would agree with that. And the third thing was cloud. Again, you've heard a lot about cloud. And it's not a technology issue. Absolutely, I can talk to you, for hours on what we're doing in the data center, in the private cloud, et cetera. But it's really about changing business models, a consumption model. The top 10 cloud providers grew 37%, whilst the rest grew at 2%, to give you some idea of what's happening here. And I know many of the salesmen from Cisco would kill me if they heard me say this, but it's true. In 10 years' time, unless you are a cloud provider yourself, I doubt that you will be buying servers. I very much doubt it, just for the same reason that you're not buying today power generators. So that's another massive trend sitting underneath all of this. The third trend, and you can see that I'm tracking them on the circles above. Data is the new oil. When you look at the 20th century, that which fueled the industrial revolution was oil. Today it's about data, and again, we've heard some fascinating stories. Let me ask you a question. You've got 2 choices. I'm going to give you, on option A, I'm going to give you $100 every day for the next 7 weeks. Or choice number 2, I'm going to give you 1 cent, and we're going to double it every day for the next 7 weeks. Who would take option 1? Show of hands. You know the story, don't you? Okay, so most of you would take option 2. Let me give you the number. Well, in 37 days, you'd have $3,700 with option A. In 37 days, you will have $1.4 billion. $1.4 billion. Why am I giving you this analogy? Because what's going on right now is that if you go back in your homes 20, 30 years ago, if you were lucky you had 1 CPU in your house. Roll the clock forward, in the 90s, you might have had a few. I counted today in my house in excess of a few hundred. Now you might say, why is that? Well, first of all, if you take a look at some of the new smartphones, they've either got 4 or 8 processors in them. Now, those processes in and of themselves are far more powerful than the one you had 20 years ago. So what's happening is, not only are you spewing out more data from each CPU, you've now got more CPUs in every single device that you're using. Most of us today have got multi-core, most of us. So this data explosion that you've been hearing about is inexorable. It's only going to explode further. And I think we've had some really good examples of what's going on. But there's some, again, second-order effects. You know, we've been living in a world of causality. We've always wanted to know why. Why was something happening? I think with big data, we're changing and moving from not necessarily needing to know why, but only what. What do I mean by that? If you're stuck in traffic and on your screen it comes up, take a left turn and go around this and you'll save yourself 20 minutes, do you really care why? No. But big data and analytics can help you plod through the traffic and save not just time, safety, pollution. When you see epidemics, cancer breaking out, and analytics can tell you that this trend is happening and you should stop doing X. Do you really care why? Now, no. And there's plenty of other examples. We've heard of them. We're at a point now where it is absolutely critical for society that we take this data that's spewing out at us and start asking the right questions. And this is the key point. And the previous speaker made this point. It's not about, and I say this inside Cisco because we know there's plenty of data out there. We've got some great technology to compute it. But that is not, in fact, that's going to make things more complicated if you don't ask the right question. So what big data is really about is making decisions, making the right decisions quickly. That's what it's about. And somebody gave a great analogy. It's like looking out in space. Well, we know that there's plenty of stars. Here's a telescope, which will help you analyze it. But if you don't point the telescope in the right direction, you're just looking at space. And that is exactly what we need to do with analytics. And I believe, again, building on the previous speaker, that in fact analytics is the most important transition of our time. Because all of the technology is there, we know there's plenty of data, it's now how do we leverage that data to save people's lives, to provide better education, and so on, and really change society. And we're at a crossroads where we actually can't afford not to use this big data, and it's compelling for us to move forward with it. Apps. Now, apps is a great story. I believe there's something like 1 billion apps if you add the App Store and the Android apps and so on out there. And I believe that by the end of this year, we are collectively going to download over 50 billion apps. So I want to tell you the story. I was invited by a very large, before I say this, I just want to hold one thought. Think about how many apps you have on your PC. Most people have about 10. Now think about how many apps you have on your smartphone. Is it 50? Is it 100? Okay, with that thought, I want to talk about this little story. I was invited with my wife to a 505 World Yachting Championships that was sponsored by a very large software company that I won't name, you can guess. I will tell you that this software company charges 7 digits for the license before you buy the hardware. So really expensive stuff. Anyway, we're watching the 505s. Now, that's actually a picture that I took. It's very difficult to see who's who and who's winning and, the nationality, the speed, etc. So they came out with something very novel. They gave us each an iPhone. And they said, hold up the iPhone, push a button, and guess what? You can see the nationality of the leader, the wind velocity, the details of the speed, direction, when it's going to, the timing, all that detail you could see on the screen. Brilliant. What's going on is you're going up to the satellite, it's going to the US, it's coming all the way back, it's on your phone and and it's much more entertaining. Anyway, that was cool. Well, I was there for about 30 minutes. Okay, I got the message and I went downstairs. And downstairs, there was a lounge room and one of the sons of one of the other couples, young Maddie, was lying on the couch. And I noticed he was watching on the screen Formula One races, cars going round and round. And I noticed there was an iPad on the coffee table. And on the iPad, there was also the same thing as the cars were going on the iPad. And I looked at the iPad, and on the iPad, it showed you the lead driver, the nationality of the driver, how much tire pressure, how much petrol was left, what the timing was, more details than actually I'd seen upstairs. And this is fascinating in real time. And Maddie's sort of watching this, and I said, Maddie, where'd you get that from? He looks at me. The App Store. And I said, Maddie, how much do you pay for that app? $14. $14. Remember the story about the software application? You can't buy for less than $7. Now, what I'm getting at here is if you're a CEO and your kid comes in and he shows you this app, and then your CIO comes in and says, this great software company can do this, but it's going to cost you $1, $2, $3 million. Oh, and by the way, you need to buy some Cisco hardware underneath it to make it all run. You can see what's going on here. And this is absolutely transformational in terms of how we see apps moving forward. Not just in terms of the apps that we know of, but I'll talk about the apps in the network and so forth. You've heard about the Internet of Things. Today, we already think that there is well over 15 billion devices that are connected to the network already. In fact, Cisco goes as far as to say that, there is so much needs to still be connected that less than 1% of that which can be connected is connected today. And again, if you want to believe some of the statistics, by 2020, it's anything between 30 and 50 billion devices will be connected to one another over time. So what does all this Internet of Things and Internet of Everything mean to us? Is it really going to help us? I think the best way for me to explain the possibilities that Internet of Everything can provide is by sharing with you this video. If you can play the movie, thanks.
Today, my ambulance knew all about a bike accident just by talking to a helmet. It grabbed the patient's record before we even picked him up. It found out the doctor we needed was at St. Anne's. And it got his okay on treatment from miles away. It even pulled strings with the stoplights. My ambulance talks with smoke alarms, and pilots, and stadiums, but of course, it's a good listener too.
Today, Cisco is connecting the Internet of Everything, so everything works.
Was that garbled? From what I heard was a bit garbled. Was it garbled for you? You could hear it, okay, good. Okay, that's the main thing. So you can see some of this. Now, I'm involved with GE, and if you look at some of their future vision, this is General Electric, they talk about the industrial internet. So I'm going to move from looking at it from a Cisco angle and talk about GE for a moment. This comes out of GE's white paper that was written just a few months ago. What they're talking about here is an instrumented industrial machine. That's the engine sitting on both sides of the Boeing that you're flying every day, right? And there's 4 of them. And an interesting thing is that Boeing doesn't actually own the engine. GE owns the engine. They lease it as a service to Boeing, right? Now, what they're doing is they're instrumenting that engine, collecting data, doing analytics on it, et cetera. And you can see that whole cycle. And now I just want to share with you our definition of the Internet of Everything. Process, data, things, and people. Building it all together, where you've got something providing the data, creating lots of it, some analysis, and then doing something with it. And you can see how it maps over this. So the jet engines are now intelligence. They got sensors. They connected back while the plane's flying into a data center in the US. And that data center is collecting all this data and it's monitoring that jet engine 7/24. And it's adjusting it in real time. And only when there's an exception that you need to have manual intervention does it send a trouble ticket to Singapore, where the jet's about to land, to provision a mechanic the right part to go and fix whatever it is that requires fixing. And in fact, in Cisco, when you look at our investments in the last 12, 24 months, it is absolutely around what's going on in the cloud, with data analytics, with new apps. And you can see it here, what we're really talking about. The network is collecting lots and lots and lots of pieces of data right now. What we're now doing is collecting that information, harnessing that information, setting policy, and providing it back to the network. Some people call this software-defined networking. Again, bringing together the new world of applications, of cloud, of analytics, and of big data. And it's happening right now. The whole transformation of the networking industry is at day 0, and you're going to see massive changes in the next few years. But I want to make this real because a lot of people, even inside Cisco, think this is some sort of long-term vision. And it is. We've got a long way to go, less than 1% connected. But here's the Snowy Mountain, hydroelectric dam. Started being built in 1947, finished in 74 at the cost of billions. But it is what lights up the east coast of Australia. Now, what was going on is we're running out of energy. So what do? Build more dams. Well, we all know there's environmental impact, there's cost, there's a whole bunch of stuff. What they indeed did was they went back inside that dam into the 6 turbines, and they gutted the turbines. They didn't rebuild the dam. What they did was they pulled the turbines out and they replaced them. They replaced them with smart turbines that have got sensors in them. They're connected by optical fiber back into the data center that collects data and tunes the turbines. What's the result? They get 35 megawatts extra per turbine. So they were getting 265 megawatts, now they're getting 300. Multiply that by 6, you're getting 210 megawatts for 400 million, which is petty change compared to the cost of new dams, new generators, etc. And in fact, again, producing enormous amounts of data through these sensors into a network, doing something smart with it, and not optimizing the performance. So this isn't some long-term futuristic thing. Absolutely, we've got a long way to go. And there are going to be some fantastic innovations around this. But that's what we mean by the Internet of Everything. And again, stealing from GE, they talk about the power of 1%. If we can improve in their market segments, and they're a pretty big company, by 1%, their segments, take a look at this. In aviation, here are the numbers. They reckon that in 15 years, we can save $76 billion, 1% improvement, by being intelligent, by connecting, by doing some smart analysis, and by, in real time feeding back. Very powerful numbers. So as I say, something big, seriously big is happening as we speak in our time. I mentioned that there was a United Nations Nobel Peace Prize winner. His name is President Shimon Peres, the president of Israel. He got up in front of an audience in July 2012. And the audience was actually about 200 or 300 people from the industry. There was the Ciscos and the IBMs and so on. And what he was doing was he was opening this new technical institution called Ma'antech. And the institution was to train Israeli Arabs on technology. And he started off by talking about Morocco and how technology had transformed Morocco, mobile phones, trebling the standard of living. And then in the auditorium he said, you guys, talking about the technology industry, have done what governments have never been able to do. We all know what's going on between the Arabs and the Israelis. And they're still fighting with one another. And yet, he was opening an institution in Israel to train, and he was saying, this is because of technology. You people, through technology, have enabled stuff that governments have not been able to do and will not be able to do. And he said, this is the only revolution without declaring a revolution, without any bloodshed, without any coercion. And ladies and gentlemen, he said that this is the greatest revolution in history. Thank you very much for your time.